It's part of the charm. It's part of the danger of interviewing. So let's do a quick introduction for everybody, and then we'll dive into what you're working on right now. Ben has done, I'll tell you guys, Ben has done lots of different products and built his own products, but also worked on products for other people as well. Before it was cool to do social networking and have dating sites, Ben had a site called Consummating.
All right.
Which had a
naughtier than it sounds, less naughty than it sounds, I should say.
I mean,
for most,
a little rebel. So, adding features in it, a bunch of. I think it was doing stars and thumbs up before everybody was doing that. Anyway, it was really neat. There were a bunch of great features to it. We sold it to CNET, right? Sold to CNET and worked there for a while and helped them start to understand some social stuff. And then got tired of SF before it was cool to be tired of SF. Went back home to Austin, ran a very successful consulting company called XO Co. with Katie Spence. Okay, go ahead. Tell me. What was XOXCO. But the reason he's joining us tonight is to talk about his new startup that he's launched called Howdy. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Howdy is our new startup. And it is, we are building chatbots, which sounded crazy 6 months ago, but sounds a lot less crazy today. But yeah, our first product is a bot that lives inside a Slack team and runs sort of like a survey tool. You can talk to multiple people on your team, collect information from them, and like aggregate it into a nice report and deliver it to project manager or stakeholders. It's like a productivity tool, a project management tool, and for a lot of people, it does things like replace stand-up meetings. Yeah, but we're really engaged in the sort of broader ecosystem of apps that are going to be delivered as messaging or inside messaging platforms like Slack and like Skype and text messaging and all sorts of other things. And it's just a really exciting time to be involved in that.
Yeah, so during the setup, we were talking about sort of the time when you were working on Consummating was really the beginning of social everything, right? So there was a long period where that was sort of the big idea, and how could you do social business or whatever, all kind of stuff, right? And I feel like this period right now is enabled by a bunch of things. Like mobile is ubiquitous right now. Messaging platforms not only are ubiquitous, but get so much usage. And then sensors and Internet of Things and all kind of data points coming online, right? Like LinkedIn just launched today, which is going to be sort of a connective tissue layer app for Internet of Things. So I feel like that's the like soup of stuff that you guys are playing with, because now there are all these contexts that you can join data points and do really timely communications, right? That connect things together.
Yeah, and some of the things that you didn't mention that we also think a lot about are artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence as a service, which is again like something that would be crazy to think of a couple of years ago or even months ago, and now is available, and then also even robotics, which can be tapped into with an API, almost the same way that you could send a tweet. So it's really exciting time, and yeah, there's like a merging of these things that makes for a really interesting mix.
So what's cool about Howdy and what you're doing with chat and with bots is that this is not a new thing at all for lots of people, but especially for you, right? This has been a long time hobby of yours, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I in the 90s, got online via dial-up, and what I dialed into was chat rooms, and in those chat rooms we built bots to create virtual worlds that we could play in. These things called like MUDs and MOOs, which were like programmable role-playing games basically, that you programmed by typing into the chat client very complicated, very long strings, very, very fault intolerant. I did AOL Instant Messenger bots, and I did, I've been involved with it sort of as a hobby and as a creative passion for quite a while. But nothing like today's opportunity, with these new platforms. Back in one of the stories I like to tell about the old days of bots, right? There was a bot called Smarter Child that was a AOL Instant Messenger bot in 2001. And you could add Smarter Child to your instant messenger buddy list, and it could answer questions the same way that Siri does, right? It would tell you what movies were playing and what the weather was and what the headlines were. People would chat with it, blah blah blah. There were 300 million people on the internet at that time, and 30 million people talked to Smarter Child. So like 10% of the global internet population talked to this bot. It was a hugely popular thing. And so this, absolutely not a new thing. In fact, like it goes all the way back, to the dawn of really computing. Like people from the very get-go really didn't want to like type and click on buttons, right? Like they wanted to just like ask for stuff and be given it. Turing was talking about this, that's why we call it the Turing test. He imagined, like thinking machines. So this is a very fundamental sort of part of like how we perceive computers and human computer interaction, but a lot of that has been glossed over as we had to deal with the reality of Windows 3.1 or whatever, and early web and all of this stuff. So but now there's this resurgence in interest in it because of like we keep saying, these big messaging platforms.
Yep, we're back to the command line, sort of.
Back to the command line. I don't know why we ever left. If I had my way, we'd still all be in DOS.
So if we fast forward back to, up to last summer, when I think your team was playing around with, I think you were doing like Slack developer stuff really before they formally launched the platform, right? But you were doing different kinds of bots. How did that come together, and then how did you decide to turn it into a product all of its own?
So we were one of the first teams to use Slack in their beta. We're very lucky to do so. And my favorite thing to do whenever I get a new tool is to crack it open and see what I can do with it. Can I program it? Can I hack it or whatever? And they had a very nice API from the very early point. So we thought, hey, look here, this is a very familiar environment for me. It felt like home. And so I wanted to start bringing some of those, old role-playing, elements back into it. One of the first things that we did, I live in Austin. I know that like New Orleans is like a great food town too, but Austin is, we have like a splendor of choice for eating lunch. And, especially where our office is, there's like taco stands, in all directions, and like, great food all over the place. So we thought, like, let's make a bot that will help us decide where to go to lunch. And, we built this simple little bot, and, it helped us go figure out where to go to lunch. And, we got more and more complex, pulled in Foursquare information and pulled in, stuff like that. But, I wrote a Medium post about it. I just thought this was kind of a funny thing. And I mean, this is 2 years ago at this point, right? So like, still a little bit before like everybody was like gaga for Slack. But even then people were like, wow, like I need this bot, right? Like teams were emailing us all the time and saying like, can we get the lunch bot? Is it open source, blah, blah, blah. So we were like, geez, maybe there's something to this. It's not just going to be, people building little hacks for their own team. Like maybe there's an opportunity to build, products that live inside Slack. So I wrote an essay called Slack is the Operating System. That was basically about this opportunity, right? That never before have such a diverse group of people in workplaces, come into a chat room together, right? Like the ops guys have always been in the chat rooms, right? They always had their IRC channel, but the designers and the HR people and the marketing people, they were never in the IRC channel all together, mixed around. So there's,
tell us how it worked, so we couldn't be involved.
well, we didn't want you there. But now, now everybody can sort of play together inside Slack, and that's really cool. So what that means is that new kinds of applications and new kinds of products can be built that live in that in that ecosystem or in that environment. And it's a different kind of collaboration. Google Docs allows people to collaborate on the same document, but everybody's getting their own view of that document. You control your cursor, I control my cursor. We're working independently on the same screen. In a Slack bot, chat room, everybody's using the bot at the same time. It's more like a role-playing game. It's like the bot is the dungeon master, and he says, "Now it's your turn. Now it's my turn." People play. The game moves forward. The bot assigns points. The game is over. So it's a totally different kind of like sort of paradigm for collaboration software. You can also have private conversations and public conversations and all sorts of stuff. So it's really, really interesting design options. So that essay was also sort of surprisingly popular. It got like 50,000 views on Medium in a couple of days, and we really started to think like, we're doing all this like painful, cross-platform mobile app development for marketing purposes. Like we had just finished like an Android app that it's just a pain in the ass, and you put it in the Android app store, and like immediately people are complaining that it doesn't work on their device, and it's like, God, why do I even try? And like nobody downloaded it anyways, and our client was all disappointed, and it's just a terrible thing. And it started to feel like maybe we should just focus on this new messaging thing, Slack. And so I put out a couple feelers, and very quickly we found some people who were enthusiastic about the ideas that we had. And
did you build did you build something besides LunchBot by then?
Oh, I mean, we have like dozens of bots. I mean, I can't even name them all. We have, bots that do everything. We have a bot that turns the lights on in the office. We have a bot that, manages our deploys. We have a bot that, collects, routes our email into Slack. We have bots that like we can monitor our infrastructure with. I have bots for my house that do like Internet of Things. For a long time, I was like obsessed with this idea of a bot that was like an app that was just a bot where you talk to the bot alone in a chat room, like just one-on-one with a bot, and the bot would basically do nothing but say like good idea or like lol. And like I built this thing as a prototype, and I like ended up talking to it for hours and hours and hours and hours. I was like, what am I doing? But it was like so rewarding to me that like if I was on a dog walk and it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh, I have an idea, and I'd like tap it out into the little chat room, and the bot would be like, good one, Ben, and it's like, yeah, validation. And it was a weird thing, but there's something about like getting the idea out and like typing it, and it's now out of my brain, and it's on paper now, so just it's super valuable. So I was like pitching that idea, like, yeah, right. So yeah, we found some investors, and we took some money. And I mean, I've been a bootstrapper my whole life, like never once spent a dime of anybody else's money. Didn't want to deal with like VCs and all of that stuff, but found this great group of people at Bloomberg Beta. They led around for us, and like it was like a breeze. And we shut the consultants down and started full time on Howdy.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about Howdy is the first product that you've put out, and then you put out a bot developer kit that we can talk about as well. But you did a bunch of experiments, including the Ben is lonely bot that you just talked about, those other things. But how did you figure out the features that you needed in Howdy, which is I think meant to just make teams go faster and automate some things for them if they're already in Slack, right?
Yeah, I mean, the basic idea of Howdy is, there's a lot of stuff that people do at work that is repetitive and, sort of rote, right? Like ranging from, so we started with stand-up meetings, right? Like the stand-up meetings are the same every single time. It takes a lot of time because everybody's got to do it in serial. And in my experience, most of the time, like people aren't really paying attention that much unless they're talking. And in my experience, person who's running the meeting is not like actually taking noting things down or creating a log or anything like that. So it's like, valuable if you're there and you hear the right thing, but like, otherwise maybe not. So that's one of the things that Howdy does, right? So you can have it, run a stand-up meeting, talks to every single member of your team individually at the same time, asks them the standard stand-up questions. What did you do yesterday? What are you working on today? Anything blocking you? When everybody's finished, collects everything and delivers it to the channel. So everybody gets to see everybody's responses. And the way we basically recommend people using that is that it's not to replace your in-person meeting. We don't want to like replace your project manager or like, the camaraderie of being in a room together, but we wanted to like take that time and make it more valuable by taking all of the like information sharing and putting it and front loading it, right? So instead of like 3 minutes per person in sequence, let's say you have 10 people, you spend 30 minutes simply exchanging the information. Well, what if all 10 of those people can do it in the same 3 minutes, and then everybody spends 7 minutes reading the document, and then you have 20 minutes to talk about it, right? 20 minutes to fix problems, 20 minutes to make decisions, 20 minutes to just sketch on the whiteboard, right? So, supercharge that meeting time. That's just the beginning of it. Like basically, you can take Howdy and like give it other things to do. Right now, like I said, it's sort of like most of the things that it can do are survey based, but very, very soon we have like a much more open scripting environment that's going to be available to, do all manner of things, ranging from the old school kind of things that Bob used to do, like chat ops things, reboot a server, blah, 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 do that kind of stuff. But, stuff like collecting lunch orders and, sending them off to the, to the restaurant or whatever. Like, so, the kind of things, again, that's just like it's the same thing every day. Somebody's got to do it, spend time tracking people down, spend time like writing it down, spend time putting into a spreadsheet, spend time taking it out of the spreadsheet. Like, why can't a machine just do it? It's easy.
Does Howdy do planning poker?
No, Howdy does not gamble in any way.
We wrote a little bot that does planning poker. So it talks to our GitHub, pulls an issue in one at a time, asks everybody to, estimate it, achieves an estimate, logs it on the ticket.
Right.
So that's kind of just in your vein of how can we speed this whole thing up, log the discussions around it, have it available to team members who maybe didn't get to look at it.
Exactly. And I mean, what we like, we've been using Howdy for now, several months, obviously. And, one of the outcomes is that like it creates these reports, it puts them on the web. So now we have this day by day log of everything that people worked on, what was blocking them, who they need to talk to, all of this stuff, go back months, day to day. I can filter it by person. If I want to do a quarterly review with somebody, I say, filter Dakota. Boom. I see everything that Dakota worked on for the last 6 weeks. We record milestones using Howdy. So I can say filter milestones. Boom. There's all the milestones that we recorded in the channel. Things like that. So really, really valuable to extract that stuff out of Slack and into like a knowledge base, for lack of a better word, a wiki or whatever, that like it makes it a discrete document that I can point at. At this point in time, this is what was happening.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about. So you're not just automating tasks within Slack; you're actually extracting data back out and doing other stuff.
Well, I mean, I see that as part of the automation, right? Like, the job is not done until like the notes are filed. So it files the notes away on your wiki.
Cool. So you're in beta right now, right? You've been putting Howdy out there, sort of. Right? How many companies are using Howdy right now?
Thousands.
Yeah.
We're a startup. I can't talk about that. Many thousands. We're the number one bot in the Slack app store. Put it that way. The most popular bot.
It's quality marketing.
We have cool apps.
Are they surprising you with things that they're doing with Howdy? So Howdy's getting out in the world, and it's not just your team using it. So what are they surprising you with? What's happening?
Oh, I mean, all the time people, email us with crazy things that they're doing. I mean, like I said, like lunch orders is a cool thing. Like it's totally like not like a project management thing, but people do these like enourate like lunch planning stuff on bigger teams. A lot of like goal setting stuff, like a lot of, there are these two really big like foreign outsourcing companies that have like, thousands of people all over the world who are like coming into their Slack all the time, like coordinating their like free, like sort of mechanical Turk people via Slack. So they use Howdy to onboard those people, right? Like to walk them through their like personnel file and like build their profile and their skill set and their availability. So it's super, super cool. There's a group that uses it to do like CrossFit like training reports with each other. We use it actually for our exercise logs in our team. So like every day at 6 a.m. it asks everybody, did they exercise yesterday? And again, it's just like creates a nice report of it, like encourages us to exercise, all sorts of stuff. Let's see, what else kind of wacky stuff do people do? Oh, one of my favorite things is like content collection for like weekly newsletters or like blogs, right? Like editorial idea collection. So people, send it out every week. Like, hey, have you found any cool links? What's exciting that you've seen in the news? Whatever, blah blah blah. Share what you're working on, and that gets fed back to the newsletter editor, and they have all the material they need to, compile the newsletter to send out. Stuff like that.
Cool. So that's Howdy, which is the bot that you guys are building and deploying. But then you also released BotKit, which is some basic tools that anybody can use to build a bot on the Slack platform. Talk a little bit about how you did that.
Sure. So, pretty soon after we released Howdy, we realized that, I've always known this, but, part of the sort of ethos of bots is like customization or like personalization. Like I have a pretty strong belief that like the right bot for you is not the right bot for me. And like, every person has to put a little bit of like polish on their bot to make it their bot, to make it do what they need, for their team or for their house or for their family or whatever. So, our goal with Howdy has always been like a customizable, programmable bot, but, some people want to get their hands dirty and like get into the code. So, we actually, sort of partnered with Slack, to release the, low-level building blocks that we use to build Howdy, and release it as an open source toolkit called BotKit. So it's a node module, and it does all of the stuff that you need to do to bring a bot online and connect it to Slack and start programming it. And it actually even supports like multiple teams. So like you can build an app in the Slack App Store. In fact, many of the apps in the Slack App Store are built on BotKit. And run a bot for thousands of teams, on this open source tool. And scarily, like on a free Heroku instance, you can run like 1,000 teams on this thing for free. So it's pretty good. And basically, the goal of BotKit was make building a bot like using a bot, right? Instead of having to deal with API programming and webhooks and like OAuth gobbledygook, like give developers tools that are just like semantic and like language-like constructs. So instead of, forget what instead of. So BotKit has things like bot hears, right? Bot hears a string. Bot hears a pattern. Bot hears hello. And then the bot can reply. Or the bot can ask a question and you give it a question and then you get the response as the result. And you can give it a couple of expected responses and like do things with that. You can start conversations and like create like multi-branching, interactions with people. And it's just very, very simple. You're, dealing with only 2 or 3 functions, but you can combine those functions to create, infinitely elaborate, interactive experiences. And so BotKit works right now with just Slack, but soon it will be working with some other interesting platforms.
Are you worried that Watson is going to use BotKit to just start to build the world's best bots and then done?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Like Watson, no, not really, but those people are lovely, and I think that Watson is awesome, and they like did some stuff with us, and they're awesome. But Microsoft, like, this is crazy to me, right? Like, we're a 6-month-old startup. Last week, Microsoft released like this huge array of bot-related stuff, a lot of which is built on BotKit. So like, Microsoft uses my open source tool. It's just nuts.
So I may be misunderstanding. Is BotKit only built for Slack developer platform, or can you use it for other platforms as well?
Today, it's only for Slack. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, gotcha. So I have a couple more questions, but if you're in the live chat and you want to pose a question, that's cool. If you guys want to pose questions, here and ask a question, we can do that too. So you've said this thing a couple times about personalizing bots, or kind of giving it their own flavor. So I wanted to have you talk a little bit about how do you do that? I mean, your composition palette, your design palette is kind of limited, right? And that's a wonderful. It is a constraint. So how do you give a bot a personality, and what goes into those sort of decisions?
I think it really depends on the kind of bot you're building, and like the very, the scope of that you want to build personality really ranges. Like if you're building something that lives on your team and only your team, and does the quirky things that your team needs to do, like personality, go crazy, right? Like it makes jokes, it talks dirty, it puts in GIFs, like whatever, right? There's a high tolerance for like things that like emphasize your own company culture or team culture. What we've found in the sort of like enterprise bot market, which is only just barely a thing still, the tolerance is much lower for that kind of thing. So it's like you said, it's an incredibly restrictive design constraint. In most cases, you have just text. Things are changing a little bit about that. Like you can put a button in there once in a while or whatever. But so tabular data or whatever. But like in some places, you don't even have control of your icon, right? So, or the name of your bot. So, you really have to be able to boil down the, message that you have, or the product experience, or, functionality or content, really down to like one message, one message, two messages. People have very low tolerance for, chatty bots, and they don't like them to respond to things. We had a funny idea that like we should listen for people saying lol in their chat room, and like Howdy would say good one, right? Like you just like throw in his hat, like say, oh yeah, funny joke. Bad idea, like who knew how many times people said lol in their chat rooms? Like we turned it on, and like immediately we saw in our logs, like, oh my gosh, Howdy is saying good one way too much, way too much. Like turn it off. And there's all sorts of crazy design constraints that are not obvious at the surface too. One of the other sort of takeaways that we had from our early days at Howdy were that we would ask like rhetorical questions like, hey, what's up? Right? And like you don't even really think about that as a rhetorical question, but it is. And people would respond to it. And Howdy would get confused and say like, I don't know what you mean by nothing. Right? And like, that's not a good experience. And and in fact, it's a very embarrassing experience, because, the boss was just like, hey, everybody, we're going to use this new productivity tool called Howdy. Hey, Howdy, what's up? Or whatever. And it's like, in the middle of a chat room, and, turn that bot off. So, it's very delicate. But again, I think that this is just super exciting. Like, it's a totally different set of skills and a totally different sort of developer. This is my personal take on this. But these are the best bots are going to be written by writers and editors and user experience researchers, right? People who have like the empathy for the user, what they're actually experiencing in a very direct and concrete way, right? Like there's no imagining what button somebody might click in a given circumstance, right? There's no button. You have one choice, or a very few set of discrete choices. So you have to like choose the right one and guide them to the right decision, or guide them to the right piece of content. And you have to do that in a delicate way that respects the person's time, respects the person's, whatever, like tolerance level. Is it in public? Is it in private? All of these things are considerations that you have in this thing. So it's really interesting. and challenging thing. And one of the things that's exciting to me as like a product, developer and designer and coder is like the tools are barely there. Like the practices are barely there. Like you go back and I did all this research for, best practices and, historical work and everything. And like one of the best documents out there about creating conversational user interfaces, which is basically, big words for chatbots, is this thing called the Jack principles, which is by the people who made the You Don't Know Jack DVD game, right? And they distilled down like the design, principles of how they created what seemed like a personalized interactive experience, but it was actually completely pre-recorded, clips on a DVD. So like it's an amazing document, a PDF. You can find it by Googling it. But this thing is from like 1996, right? Like that's like the best document that's out there. There's like a book that Wired published in like 1996, a terrible book. Like it's just crazy. Like there's just nothing out there. So it's like brand new. Like we get to decide, like we get to define how these things work and how they're built and how to, what's the life cycle of the content and how to manage and all this stuff. And there's like some really interesting, challenging problems. Like how do you store content in such a way that like the string can be pluralized properly if the bot is talking to multiple people at one time? Like how do you manage your content like that? Right? It's not a problem that exists in apps, not a problem that exists on the web, but it's a problem that exists here. Like, the gender of the person you're talking to, you can like personalize the message to them. But like, how do you manage the content for that? It's not something that happens right now. So it's really exciting kind of, just wide open, it's like, I say this all the time. It's like the Wild West.
Yeah, that's one of those things where as the context gets thicker and thicker with data, the bot could go off and have a sidebar with somebody because it would know it would be getting a signal or something like that. And then you'd have to program it and build all the branches to do that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I mean, you have to, I love it. I think the best kind of design constraints force you to design better, right? Obviously. And when you have just text and when you have just this super limited palette of options and a very low tolerance for, bullshit, that means that it forces you to understand what you're trying to do in a much more direct way, right? It forces you to understand the value that you bring. And you have to bring it faster than you could get it in a website or an app that you already have, right? So like it has to the only reason to do this is it's faster and better. So, if it is faster and better. So, I just love that, right? Like you don't have the distraction of like, oh, like what color is the call to action? Like, could we optimize for the, this or that? Like, no, there's none of that. It's like, you must understand the process and fully understand it in all of its complexity before you can like successfully build the thing.
So your point about low tolerance for bullshit, because generally when you're slacking, you're screwing off and sometimes and putting GIFs in there and stuff like that, but generally it's working. And so we have a question from Joel about how annoying it is sometimes to run into cutesy error messages when you're trying to do something. And it's like, why are you being cute? You broke this thing.
Yep.
I don't need you to lay the syrup on top of it right now. I'm kind of mad. Consideration for Howdy, right? If Howdy can't get in the way or be trying to be charming when you're trying to get something done, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we, one of the guidelines that we put forth is that like Howdy is always to blame when a problem happens, right? Like it's never the user's fault. They didn't type something wrong. They didn't forget a parameter. Like it was Howdy that didn't get it. It was Howdy that didn't understand, Howdy's limited ability to understand humans is the fault. We try to always sort of defer and genuflect and like, and then also like guide the user to this proper solution. A good story about this is like we had one of the core commands for Howdy is like schedule a meeting, right? And when we started, it was basically command line style, right? You said like schedule check-in with Ben Brown. Well, if you forgot Ben Brown, or it would say sorry, you used the schedule command wrong. Next time, say schedule meeting with user. So we saw like 40% failure rate, or like maybe even higher. Like it was very high, right? Like modern people don't know how to do the command line stuff. It's not something that people want to do or remember how to do. So we changed it, and so it says, oh, you want to run a meeting with who? You can say things like this, and the success rate went up to 100%. Done, right? Like it was just like guide the user to the solution that they wanted, instead of like throw an error. So that's one of these fundamental things about bots. You always gotta kind of guide the person back, back to where they want to go.
Yep. And that sounded like the language too that you used just sounded more human. Like, hey, just do this or.
Yeah, absolutely. Another funny story I have about this is we everybody kind of expects people to like say messed up things to their bot. That's like one of the things that people do to bots is like mess with a bot to see what it can do, right? Like everybody says like, whatever crazy stuff to Siri or whatever. And so you want to like build in like jokes and all of this stuff. One of the bots that we installed on our team. So one of the things I always do is like cuss at the bot to see what happens. Like, how do they handle this? Our Howdy just goes like, oh my gosh, right? Like, oh,
it's a bot.
But this one bot I turned on, I said like, fuck you, bot. And it said, no, fuck you. I was like, holy crap. Like, that was a crazy design decision. Like, what context is that appropriate? It's an enterprise productivity tool. It just told me to fuck myself, like, and I like reached out, it's like, who knows what context the person said the word fuck, right? They could have been exasperated. They could have been angry. It could have been excited. It could have been any number of things. Who knows, right? Like you cannot possibly guess what context that person was going to be in. Not okay.
Funny. So we have a couple of questions over here about what some of your favorite non-Slack bot apps are. So the suggestions over here that people like are Poncho or Quartz. Are there other things that you see kind of off Slack platform that you're like, hey, that's good. I like the way they're doing that.
Yeah. I love Quartz. That's a great app. If anybody hasn't used that, like it's a news app that's in the form of a bot. You chat with it about the day's news. Super cool. You don't actually have to type. It just like gives you pre choices or whatever. Poncho is also great. We share a venture firm for what it's worth. But what was I going to say? Lark is a really interesting one, which is a like personal fitness bot that'll like check in on you and ask what you had for lunch and how many did you do any exercise and stuff like that, and kind of gives you encouragement. But it's all in the form of conversation. You can like tap it on your phone or on your watch and like talk to it about what you ate. Really, really cool. I am fascinated by this new Nintendo app that just came out for the phone called Miitomo, which not on the surface is not really a bot, but it kind of is, because basically like it's a little avatar of yourself and it asks you questions and you talk to it like a person, and then it goes off and it talks to your friends' bots and it talks to them and exchanges answers, and then it comes back to you and like gives you the answers that they gave. So it's like automating the process of like keeping up with the small talk with your friends about like what TV shows they've watched and what did they eat last night, and like just giving it to you in this like casual kind of playful way. I think that's a weirdly prophetic vision of the future of like ubiquitous bots, where we have digital representations of ourselves that sort of go off and do stuff for us and then come back and report on what they've done. But download that thing and spend a couple hours on it, because it's definitely like a creepy vision of the future. See, any other bot? I just love all bots. I love my Alexa. That's a bot. Those things are great. Get one of them. My God, your life will never be the same. Twitter bots. There's a bunch of really cool Twitter bots too. I love, like this guy Darius Kazemi on Twitter makes all these crazy Twitter bots. There's just an enormous number of cool Twitter bots. Like the Twitter bot community like carried the torch for bots for the last 5 or 6 years. The only kind of bots that were out there for the last couple of years were like botnets that were like attacking your computer from Russia, and these artistic Twitter bots. If you search bot ally on Twitter, you can find this vibrant community of crazy people building bots.
Cool. Anybody here? Questions that you want to pose? Hey, Andrew, what's up? Anybody? Yeah. Come over here so we can hear you.
Sitting. Step up to the mic.
Sorry. We'll see the chair for you.
So have you played around with AIML or anything like that ever? I played around with that like 10 years ago. Pretty fun and cool.
I have AIML is like an XML schema for creating like AI chatbots. I find it incredibly hard to deal with. And I actually, so a little bit, I prefer a much more handcrafted approach. I think that, like I said earlier, right, like these things are going to be created by writers and editors and process people. And there's definitely the option to let the machine take over, right? There are great tools, and I think somebody just asked about this, how do you learn the context of conversations within chats, right? There are like really cool tools now available that are free and easy to use, like wit.ai, which is a natural language processing tool. They'll take your chat messages and basically use machine learning and natural language processing to guess at what the intent of the user was so that you can respond to it like that. And that's free to use, and it's like easy. And IBM has one, and Microsoft has one, and Facebook has one, and Google has one. So you can pick and choose. And we built it into BotKit, so it's like just a plugin, so you can just use it without doing anything. And those things, pull all sorts of information out of the chat and, make it a lot easier to create, to like make a believable experience or like a believable intelligence on the other side without any actual, AI in the, in the like way it's actually, talking. One of the sort of counter examples is like 2 weeks ago, last week or whatever, Microsoft launched that, Twitter bot called Tay, and they use machine learning to like generate responses to people's messages. I thought that was a very questionable decision to begin with, but that's, considering Twitter, what Twitter is. But you guys probably saw like it didn't go well because people talk about Hitler on Twitter, and so the bot talked about Hitler, and oops. You're like, I don't think that the machines are ready to synthesize answers yet. Right, like they're good. They're getting better at understanding what people want, but they're not so great at like saying it back. And another thing that I come across all the time, like journalists ask me this stuff all the time, is like, like if people talk to it enough, like will it like grow new features? Like there's this sort of idea like, oh, what Facebook is doing with Facebook M is that like millions and millions of people are going to talk to Facebook M, and it's going to like figure out how to order an Uber car. Like, no. Like a programmer is going to figure that out and write an algorithm and the script that like lets you order an Uber car. So like programmers, writers, these are the people who build these things for reals for now. Great question. AIML, check it out. Pandora bots.
Anybody else?
Yep. You sort of, I think you got at kind of my question towards the end. I was going to ask like foreign languages, and then I was like, wait, like how about just slang, like regional slang within American? I guess is the answer like usually like, look, it's natural language processing and it's been solved somewhere else?
Sometimes. I would say, yeah, like the modern take would be yes. You plunk it into Wit AI, it tells you like that person wants to order a pizza or whatever, right? And that stuff, it like works pretty well. It's all statistics basically when it really boils down. So what you get out of that is like, it's a 65% chance that this person's talking about ordering a pizza or whatever. But super cool. However, like the long history of bots basically teaches that parlor tricks will get you like 95% of the way there, right? Like, so, okay, great example. Alexa. I mean, sorry, what's it called? Eliza, right? You guys heard of Eliza, the Eliza bot? Maybe, yes, no? Eliza was a bot created in 1956 by a guy who was a cognitive therapist. He wanted to like understand like why people were crazy, and you know, I guess he was a psychologist or psychiatrist or something like that. He was interested in using computers to help people, so he built a chat bot. You know, again in like the 50s, he built a chat bot that would allow people could talk to it and say whatever they wanted, and using a very, very simple algorithm, it would ask questions about what they had said. So it was looking for keywords like mother, father, family, work, love, hate, pain, etc. And it would just, so if you said like, hey, you know, whatever, blah, 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 I hate my mom or whatever, it's like, well, tell me why you hate your mom. And people back in the 50s, like people fell for it completely. Right? It fell for it so completely that the guy who created it was actually became like an anti-AI like zealot. He was like, this is wrong. It's manipulative. You know, he saw his graduate students. There's this anecdote that I read that, you know, he came into the lab one day and his graduate students like, oh, like you've interrupted my like private session with Eliza. Like, please give me some time. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like the machine doesn't care. It doesn't know what you're talking about. Just spitting back patterns. But you know, people buy it. You know, even with Howdy, right? Like you can say things like run, you know, the sort of most discreet way of running a meeting would be run meeting at Ben Brown. But you could say like run a fun meeting with Ben Brown, run a meeting with my pal Ben Brown, run that stupid fucking meeting with that guy over there, Ben Brown. And all it's doing is looking for run, meeting, and Ben Brown. Right, so it just discards everything else, you know, and that way you get like this huge amount of flexibility without actually coding an AI. Good question.
Thanks. Yeah. All right. Max is telling me that there might be more questions over here.
Yeah, there's a bunch of here. Let's go to Be Nice to Bears. Andrew, super internet famous Andrew. hero to the internet. You guys don't even understand how fundamental this guy has been to the progress of the internet. Created like one of the first blogging platforms, and it's super, super cool. The tendency in consumer products seems to be for apps to need less and less typing. Do you think bots can gain any traction in non-business environments where people aren't already sitting and typing? Absolutely. And I mean, I think that one of the interesting trends that I've seen in the world of bots now, as people are gaga for bots, is that the chat platforms themselves are offering a little bit more ability to insert like buttons and UI stuff. So Kik is a great example. Kik is like a very popular messaging platform here in North America. There's like 300 million people who use Kik, and their bots can like insert little buttons. Right, so just like, oh, like, you know, yes or no. So you don't have to type it; you just click the button. Some of that stuff is forthcoming, you know, in other platforms too. But I think that that's going to be a bunch of people. Oh, those are not followers; those are hands that I got. Woo woo. Okay, cool. I was like, whoa, a bunch of people just followed. Yeah, so you know, I think that these things are going to evolve. I actually just read, you know, a lot of this got started because of WeChat in China, right? Not to get too off topic, but there's this great blog post by this guy, Dan Grover, Google it, that's about how people in China use WeChat and how official accounts in China have dominated, you know, the normal apps, right? And this, to some degree, this is why people are so excited about the possibility here, because there's hundreds of millions of people on Facebook Messenger. Like there's nearly 1 billion people on Facebook Messenger, and there are no apps yet, right? There's no apps in the App Store. So, you know, think about when the App Store launched, right? There was not 1 billion people with iPhones. Anyways, so people in China use WeChat official accounts to do things like check their bank account and order food and like order cars. And it's just like a chat away, right? Well, Not anymore. Like a couple of years ago, it was a chat away. Now, like there's little mini apps inside the chat window, right? So you click on the guy, you say hello, and up slides a little app. So we'll see. I think that there's the real place is going to be like a hybrid, right? Like sometimes, and I mean we do this in Howdy, right? Sometimes there's things you just can't do in a chat window, like let's say dragon, right? Like nobody's gonna like want to like move item 1 to position 3, now move position 6 to position 7, like that. You just kick them out to the web. The web still exists, apps still exist. Click away. Good question, Andrew. Fucking rock star.
All right, we have kept you just about an hour, so I don't want to overdo it. You're not actually a bot. Never mind what these people are saying in the side here.
I am a robot. I appear to be a human, but underneath is metal. I'm emotionless. I'm cold and dead on the inside. And I am very realistic, though. And somehow I can breed.
So we should probably just tell people how they can mess around with these tools, right? So BotKit we've talked about. You could go download BotKit and start playing with it, right? That could be one thing.
Howdy.ai/BotKit. Yep.
Howdy itself is configurable, and you can do things with Howdy, right?
Yep, absolutely. And that Howdy.ai, very easy to, one click and Howdy will appear on your team and you can start talking to him. Bots don't have gender.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, that's one of those personality things that you're talking about, though. You got a mental model, for yourself about how you think about Howdy.
Yes, I do. We have his little. See, I do it all the time. But like, we had a design team like make an icon for us, and we were like, it is not a face. Do not give us a face.
I mean, it looks like stubble.
Yeah, well, it's sort of face-like, but it is not a face because it is not a person, and it does not care about you. It is a computer program. I mean, I think if I could end on any little note, it's this. Look, these things are cool and fun to build. It's fun to like turn on a BotKit bot. Like the BotKit repo on GitHub has a fully functioning bot out of the gate, like that does all sorts of, it doesn't do that much, but like turn it on. It's on your team. You can talk to it. You can say, my name is Ben. It says, your name is Ben. That is fun. You can start building jokes, do wacky stuff. Then you start getting useful. It's really, really cool. But it's just another way of building user interfaces, right? It's just another kind of app. It's not like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an artificial intelligence. It doesn't have to be super complex. In fact, it's better to be simple, right? You can have 1 million bots, or you could have one bot that does 1 million things. But like, it doesn't, these things, I would say, like, should be simple and easy and fun, and avoid complexity at all costs, because there's not a whole lot of room for it.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time tonight. It's been great.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
But I feel like I learned a whole lot more through all these questions, so that was great. The one other thing we should probably mention is that you guys also run a Slack developer hangout.
Yes.
People can join. It's a Slack channel, and you can go and talk to other Slack developers.
Yes,
right?
the link to that is on Howdy, but I will put it here too. There it is, and there's 1,500 developers in that already. Super active. The people from Microsoft are there. The people from Slack are there. All sorts of people from all over, all sorts of cool startups that are like in this space are in there. There's like dozens of bots that you can play with in there. Goes all night long. People in Australia talking and all sorts of stuff. It's great. So if stuff is interesting to you, by all means, come on. We're also planning on at the end of the summer, we're going to have a couple-day conference or camp kind of thing here in Austin. The information will be on our Twitter account, which is @HowdyAI, and I am @Ben Brown. Please join the 4,000 people. Yeah, I just broke 4,000. Who follow me?
Awesome. All right, Ben, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye, New Orleans.
Really? Come on.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you, man. Thank you.